decided a long time ago that that if he had to die, this is the way he was going to die, by fighting fires and saving lives. And when he decided to go into the fire, or go into the rescue rather than the other way, he made that decision. So we both said to each other that he died doing what he wanted to do.
Last question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very tasteful and beautiful way in which you've covered this. Thank you.
And we've been listening to the New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani along with Fire Commissioner Tom Van Essen, who were addressing reporters briefly. The mayor noting that hundreds of firefighters are still missing and dozens of police officers still missing in the wake of the attacks on the World Trade Center. He said that the fire department has been an incredible example of bravery to the nation, and he also compared the bravery of the city's fire department and firefighters to the actions of the heroes during the bombing of Pearl Harbor. In addition, the mayor said that American democracy is being tested, but that a stronger nation will emerge. That was the mayor speaking in New York City. Well, right now you're looking at the skyline of Manhattan. You can see a little bit of smoke still rising from the spot where the twin 110-story towers of the World Trade Center had stood as a symbol of New York. And you're looking at a live picture now from the scene of Ground Zero, where terrorists brought down the twin towers, and workers are continuing their relentless sifting through the rubble. At this hour, they are hoping to find survivors, but they have not found any for the past couple of days. New York's police commission says that 152 bodies have now been recovered, 92 of them identified. The death toll at the Pentagon now stands at 189. Among the other major developments today, President Bush says we are at war and tells Americans to prepare for a prolonged fight against terrorism. He is discussing the battle plan today with his national security team at Camp David. The Justice Department says that 25 people have been arrested for immigration violations as a result of the investigation into Tuesday's attacks. However, one official says that none of them have been charged with any crimes related to the attacks. In addition to those arrested, the FBI also has a man in custody. He was first detained at Kennedy Airport on Thursday on suspicion of having a fake pilot's license. He is being held as a material witness in the attacks. And the New York Stock Exchange confirmed this afternoon it will resume trading on Monday for the first time since Tuesday's attacks. The announcement came after the New York Stock Exchange's sophisticated computer system passed all tests. A spokesman says that 2 minutes of silence will be observed on Monday before trading resumes at 9:30 a.m. Newsweek's Michael Isikoff has been following this story from the very beginning, in addition to following the investigation as well. We believe we have him on the phone, and let's chat with him about the latest in the investigation. Michael, good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Let's talk about the latest that you've uncovered for Newsweek in this investigation.
Yes, what we're reporting now on our website, or will be up shortly, is that the FBI actually began an investigation into 2 of the suspected hijackers just a couple of weeks ago, before the attack, after getting information from the CIA that the men were associated with the terrorist organization of Osama bin Laden. The key piece of evidence that prompted the CIA to alert the FBI to these men, and the prime guy is Khalid al-Mihdhar, who was a hijacker, has been identified as one of the hijackers aboard the American Airlines flight that crashed into the Pentagon, was he had been captured on a surveillance videotape in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia last year, meeting with one of the suspects in the October 12, 2000 bombing of the USS Cole in the in Yemen, which killed 17 U.S. sailors. That prompted the FBI to begin, the CIA said that Mihdhar and one of his associates, Salam al-Hamzai, had entered the country, and the FBI began an investigation looking for them, and they were actively looking for these 2 guys at the very moment that the plane crashed into the Pentagon, and the other planes, of course, crashed into the World Trade Center.
In their investigation, when they were, as you say, actively looking for these gentlemen, is there any clue as to how close they got to actually find them?
It doesn't look like they were close at all. The information that the FBI had received from the Immigration and Naturalization Service was very sketchy, and as one official told us, turned out to be completely bogus. That is that Al-Madar listed as his address, he was entering the country on a business visa earlier this year, and he listed as his address the Marriott Hotel in New York. Well, of course, there are many Marriott hotels in New York. It's a large hotel chain, and the FBI began methodically looking over hotel records of every Marriott hotel in the New York area and came up empty. It concluded that, of course, the information that the Al-Madar had listed was simply false, that that's not where he was staying at all.
So a key piece of evidence and a key piece of information, but of course yet raises many, many questions in its wake. Thanks for joining us very much. I really appreciate that.
Anytime.
Let's turn now to NBC's chief legal correspondent, Dan Abrams, who is standing by with even more on the investigation. Dan, what do you make of this very latest little piece of evidence that links essentially the potential hijackers of Tuesday's bombing into the bombing of the USS Cole?
Well, and ultimately, and probably the most important point here is ultimately back to Osama bin Laden, because, of course, the authorities have long been convinced that the bombing of the USS Cole was done at the very least at the direction of Osama bin Laden. This is probably one of the key pieces of evidence that has convinced the government that bin Laden was behind this. Now, you know, it is certain that the government is investigating other connections as well, but this unquestionably one piece in this puzzle, and this is a vast and extremely large puzzle that they have to put together, going across many continents in many countries. But no question that if this pans out, this is one of those important pieces. Now, some other developments. Today, as you pointed out before, 25 people in custody in connection with the case being held by the INS, including 2 people detained in Texas on a train. Ayub Ali Khan, age 51, and Mohammed Jawed Azmaf were found on a train with $5,000 cash, hair dye, and box cutters. Remember, box cutters were the weapon that some of the hijackers had used. They are being questioned, but remember, the INS can only detain people for about 3 days without charging them with some sort of crime. This is a civil detention, not criminal. So they're going to have to investigate, figure out what they have, if anything, on any of these people. They've also put out a list of 100 people they would like to talk to. The FBI would like to speak with a variety of people who they have not been able to find. They have put their names out to local police departments around the country. 2 big hot spots in this investigation so far, at least that we know of. One of them in Florida. It seems that about 12 of the hijackers lived in Florida at one time or another, and 3 of them went to a flying school in Florida. That's just the beginning. What the investigators will do is they will go to the homes, they'll talk to friends, they'll talk to associates, they'll follow a paper trail, they'll seize computers, they'll do everything they can to try and figure out who else was involved with these people. Another spot that they're going to be looking in, and they have been looking in, and that is in Germany, in particular, Hamburg, Germany. 3 of the alleged hijackers lived in Hamburg, Germany, and as you see here from this video, they actually raided the home of one of them, and his girlfriend lived there as well. The authorities saying that they found some items in a suitcase in the home relating to aviation-type manuals. In addition, 2 of the other suspects lived there as well. One of them, Muhammad Atta, they found in his home, or they found eventually when they seized some of the emails that he had been sending out. He was part of a study group that they looked into as well. We are going to continue with more on the investigation. I'll be joined again by the investigative panel, and one of the issues we'll talk about is how the French were able to avoid an attack on the Eiffel Tower. Many people asking the question, how can we prevent this from happening again? according to our guests, they say the French may have some answers. We'll talk about that this hour. Soledad.
All right, Dan, thanks very much. We're looking forward to your next discussion with your panel. We should also mention that you can learn more about the list of suspected hijackers issued by the FBI on MSNBC.com. There you can also learn more about prime suspect Osama bin Laden and the military might of the nation that has protected him, Afghanistan. You can also follow a timeline animation of the attack on America, and if you're interested in getting involved, see what you can do to aid the ongoing relief effort. Today, President Bush is asking the world, are you with us or are you against us? As of right now, Pakistan has said, count us in, but that's a country that's been put in a very precarious situation. Pakistan neighbors Afghanistan, which of course is where it's believed that prime suspect Osama bin Laden may be hiding out. Through it all, President Bush is staying the course. NBC's John Palmer is joining us from the White House this afternoon. John, what's the latest from where you are?
Good afternoon, Soledad. President Bush remains at the presidential retreat in the Maryland mountains this afternoon, where earlier today he held a meeting with all members of his national security team to assess the whole situation and to plan military strategy. As you might expect, the president devoted his morning radio broadcast, his weekly radio broadcast, to the subject of terrorism, and here's part of what the president had to say.
I will not settle for a token act. Our response must be sweeping, sustained, and effective. We have much to do, and much to ask of the American people. You will be asked for your patience, for the conflict will not be short. You will be asked for resolve, for the conflict will not be easy. You will be asked for your strength, because the course to victory may be long. In the past,
again, the president's entire national security team was at that meeting at Camp David today, including the Secretary of Defense and also Condoleezza Rice, the president's national security advisor, and of course Secretary of State Colin Powell, who had this to say to reporters.
I might especially want to thank the President and people of Pakistan for the support that they have offered and their willingness to assist us in whatever might be required in that part of the world as we determine who these perpetrators are. It's a coalition that will stay intact, that will be built upon over does not just go after these perpetrators and those who gave them haven, but the whole curse of terrorism that is upon the face of the earth.
It should be noted that for the first time, President Bush used the name Osama bin Laden and saying that he was indeed the prime suspect. Nobody knows exactly where this alleged and accused terrorist is at the present time, but he is believed to be somewhere in Afghanistan. And Pakistan, the neighbor, has a long border common with Afghanistan, and the leaders of Pakistan have been under increasing pressure from the United States to cooperate with us as this country tries to track down Osama bin Laden and the various terrorist cells that he sponsors. And late word from Pakistan indicates that they have agreed to open their airspace to the United States aircraft, that they have agreed to share some intelligence, and they have agreed to tighten their border with Afghanistan. However, reportedly, they have not agreed to allow the presence of U.S. troops on their territory, where U.S. troops might stage raids or attacks into Afghanistan after Osama bin Laden. I think what is clear today from the White House is that there has been a change in the tone, and that is very much to prepare the American people for a long, tough, difficult struggle, one that's going to take a long time, one that's going to be comprehensive, but it's not going to be immediate cure to the situation. It's going to take months and probably years. Soledad?
NBC's John Palmer for us at the White House. John, thank you very much for that update.
Thank you.
New York Senators Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer gave the traditional radio response. Both Democrats fully supported the president's resolve.
We will see to it that justice is done in full measure for what this terror has wrought. Let us have faith, Abraham Lincoln once said, that right makes might. And in that faith, let us, to the end, dare to do our duty. The events of September 11th, 2001 form a crucible out of which an even stronger nation can be forged. That is our duty, and I know that is what New Yorkers and Americans will do.
And back in Lower Manhattan, the cleanup effort continues on a sunny day. Finally, these are some live pictures from across the Hudson River to the area where the World Trade Center once stood. Right now, officials are on Wall Street just east of Ground Zero. They're making sure that the buildings and the market systems are ready to open for business on Monday. We're going to fly you over the area using NBC News animation so we can show you just how Tuesday's chain of events unfolded. The first tower fell, then the second tower fell, then next the buildings around the Twin Towers started to crumble. First the Marriott Hotel, and then building number 7. You can see the animation right there. Let's take a look. Well, obviously that is layout of the World Trade Center and the buildings surrounding it. Now, 5 days later, some of those buildings are still in danger of collapse. Officials fear that the American Express and Merrill Lynch buildings, as well as One Liberty Plaza and the Millennium Tower, could all still fall. Well, now we want to show you a piece of videotape that is nothing short of chilling. Shortly after the collapse of the first World Trade Tower, New York Dr. Mark Heath put on his scrubs. He grabbed the video camera that he routinely carries with him, that he takes to document accidents. And as the mass of people rushed away from Ground Zero, he went into Ground Zero shortly before the collapse of the second tower. Now, Mark Heath isn't really ready to speak fully about his experience, but if you watch this videotape, you will see that it speaks very clearly for him.
Steve, get the 4-9 battalion, you know.
Need anybody with emergency medical experience?
My estimate is we probably lost 200 firefighters.
Oh my God.
And God knows how many thousands of people.
Okay. So you want me to wait right here? Okay.
Multiple spots. Okay. And stay away from any other high-rise building.
Okay.
That's the target.
Look out. I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. I just buried him sick. I'm sorry I came down. I just had to help you, but I should have known a second moment ago. Oh God. It is black as night and I'm outside in broad daylight. I just came and got down behind the car. You know, I can see a tiny bit. This is incredible. Okay, I'm gonna have to go find people who need help. But I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot? I'm seeing a couple of clean breaths. That's good. Okay. Back to you. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, over here!
Are you okay?
Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
Mike!
Don't have oxygen. Hello, Doc. Hey, that guy needs some oxygen. If someone can share it with him. 10-4. Thanks.
Dr. Mark Heath spent the next several hours alongside other volunteer medics who were caring for the wounded. The experience has so affected him He has not yet spoken publicly about what he has seen and what he recorded. Of all the heartbreaking scenes that you can see in New York City today, almost none is more wrenching than the one in Lower Manhattan, where the grim task continues for family members who are trying to locate their loved ones who have been missing since Tuesday's attack on the World Trade Center. The New York Armory in Manhattan is serving as a command post for information, and NBC's Monica Novotny is there with the very latest. Monica, I know that dozens and dozens and dozens of family members come to you to show their picture in any hope that by showing the picture to TV cameras, maybe there is a chance that their loved one will be seen and identified. Is that scene continuing again today?
Absolutely, Soledad. People are coming to us with the flyers and photographs, and people want to tell their story. We were here yesterday as well, and what everyone continues to tell me as they approach is it's the same story. They say, you know, I can't sit at home and watch this on television or listen to it on the radio in the car. I've got to be out doing something, and if this is what I can do, then this is what I'll do. And they're standing out passing the flyers. I want to show you a little bit of what's going on behind me as well. Across the street, a makeshift memorial really has come underway here. All of those flyers are being posted on apartment buildings that are just beyond here, right next to the Armory. And if you look just on this side of the street here, all those people, those are people from the community, New Yorkers from the neighborhood and surrounding areas who have come to see this memorial. They're looking at the pictures. Many people are crying. Incredibly moving. Last night, lots of people were out here with candles. So the community response here has been tremendous. Now, also on the other side, I'm going to turn around this way. Right up against the Armory, the folks you see, those are the family members. And as you know, there are almost 5,000 New Yorkers officially missing here in New York City. The family members come here to check the patient lists of all of the people who have been brought into the hospitals in the area. Unfortunately, most people are not matching up the names of their loved ones on those lists. So they take the next step. They fill out the missing persons reports. They sit down with detectives inside the Armory and go through the process of bringing out the personal details of their loved ones, the identifying marks, what they might have been wearing, the jewelry. Again, those are clues to this puzzle for investigators. Now today the call is for DNA samples. Investigators are asking family members who are coming for the first time and those who have already been here to come back with DNA samples. They want toothbrushes, hairbrushes, razors, any personal items that might have cells that are shed in the day-to-day routines. Those two more pieces of the puzzle for investigators in identifying people pulled from the rubble. We've been speaking with family members here who are very emotional. Their priority is finding their loved ones, but in addition, they're telling me that they're looking at the bigger picture. They're beginning to think about what the president has said today, and they're beginning to look toward retaliation, and some of them are getting angry. So we'll bring you some more of those family members later on this afternoon. Soledad, back to you.
All right, Monica Novotny reporting for us from the Armory, where folks are hoping to get a handle on exactly where their missing loved ones are today. Well, as the nation mourns this tragedy, funerals were held this morning for one of New York's bravest and also for TV commentator and attorney Barbara Olson. Both were killed in Tuesday's acts of terrorism. First, Father Michael Judge, New York City Fire Department chaplain. He was remembered by his friends and family members and colleagues. Hundreds of mourners lined up the streets of Midtown Manhattan early this afternoon to say goodbye to the much-loved chaplain. The 68-year-old Franciscan priest, who is known as Father Mike, was killed on Tuesday when he was hit by falling debris while he was administering last rites to a fallen firefighter. Among the mourners at St. Francis of Assisi Church, former President Bill Clinton, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, and their daughter Chelsea. And Barbara Olson was laid to rest this morning. The 45-year-old Republican strategist, attorney, and television commentator was killed on Tuesday on board Flight 77 when it crashed into the Pentagon. She was the wife of Ted Olson, the U.S. Solicitor General.
He took them to himself.
At a funeral mass celebrated this morning at St. Thomas Roman Catholic Church in Arlington, Virginia, Barbara Olson was remembered for her bravery and her humanity.
For our beloved Barbara and all the innocent national martyrs who were so cruelly taken from us on Tuesday, that they be speedily and joyously welcomed into the company of the angels and the saints, and that they become intercessors on our behalf before the throne of God Almighty. Let us pray to the Lord.
Both will be, of course, remembered by their friends and loved ones. And welcome back to our continuing coverage. Let's begin by getting you up to date on the very latest information. If you were with us just a short while ago, you heard Michael Isikoff report to us that Newsweek's latest finding in the investigation is that the FBI had been investigating two of the hijackers allegedly involved in Tuesday's attacks for several weeks beforehand. They were under suspicion of having connections to Osama bin Laden. President Bush is mapping out a battle plan for a war on terrorism, which he vows to win. He is meeting with his national security team at Camp David under extremely tight security. For the first time today, Mr. Bush identified Osama bin Laden as the prime suspect in the terrorist attacks, but he also said that there will be other targets. And fallout today for the terrorist attacks. Anticipating a drop in airline travel, both Continental and Northwest Airlines announced that they are cutting their schedules by 20%. Continental also announced the layoffs of some 12,000 workers. Here now with the very latest on the investigation, we turn to NBC's chief legal correspondent, Dan Abrams. Dan, back to you once again.
Well, hi there, Soledad. I promised in my last report we would talk about this issue of how to prevent this from happening again. And that is certainly one of the elements of this investigation. Authorities on an international search to find suspected terrorists to try and avoid another disaster. I'm joined by Joe Cantamesa, who is a retired special agent with the FBI, who's in charge of the special operations in the New York office in 1993 when the World Trade Center was bombed. Michael Cherkasky is president and CEO of Kroll, a private investigation company. He also was a prosecutor in the World Trade Center bombing case. Mike, during one of our last discussions here, we were talking about this issue of how other countries have dealt with some of these terrorist threats, and you were sort of lauding the way the French have been able to do it, and you pointed out that the French had even been able to thwart an effort to bomb the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, back in 95, 96, this same group that we suspect here, the bin Laden group, a splinter of that, proposed to and planned a terrorist attack of flying a jet into the Eiffel Tower, similar to what they did 5 years later to us. And the French secret services, intelligence services, with very aggressive undercover work, very aggressive wiretapping, were able to penetrate that scheme and stop it.
But when you say very aggressive, what does that mean? I mean, how is that different from what our federal bodies, the CIA, the FBI, have been doing up to this point?
Well, we certainly have more restrictions on our law enforcement. We restrict the ability to wiretap. In France, they were wiretapping everyone's conversations. They were, again, hiring people for paying them money who were very bad people, murderers, to give them information. That was not going on here and had been restricted here.
And Joe, this is something that some law enforcement organizations have been asking for a while now, true?
They want to be able to keep up with technology, not any expanded authority or expanded investigative capability, but tools to conduct what laws are currently on the books and should be investigated.
And so what does need to happen now? I mean, what do you think the changes that need to be employed are?
Well, a simple change would be if the privacy advocates would start telling the truth and start really speaking the facts as to what law enforcement has been trying to do for some time. That would be a great start. And secondly, to allow those tools to be appropriately deployed pursuant to the same rules that they currently are.
And Mike, as a lawyer, I want to change topics very quickly in a minute, but we're probably going to see a change in our laws, right?
I think we're going to see that some of the executive lawyers that have restricted the CIA, I think, are certainly going to be changed.
All right. Let's talk about two of these men who've been arrested. I want to ask you guys a question. Ayub Ali Khan, Mohammed Jawed Azmaf, arrested on a train in Texas. Apparently, they were fighting. They were involved in an altercation. This is literally a day after everything happens on these flights. They are carrying a lot of cash. They've got hair dye, and they've got box cutters, allegedly, the tool of choice for these terrorists. The question I have for you, Joe, is, we know that they're being questioned now by the authorities. They've been detained by INS. Is there any possibility that these guys wanted to get caught and possibly to sort of disseminate disinformation? I mean, I know this may sound like a conspiracy theory, but I know a lot of people are saying it sounds so ridiculous that these guys get in a fight on a train and suddenly get caught. Is there any, would you be concerned at all as an FBI agent interviewing these people?
I'd be objective, and I'd want to really see what the facts were. I would not think it would be intentional, but anything is possible, and it could be they came a little unglued, it could be the pressure, maybe they didn't succeed at their original target, a lot of possibilities.
All right, got to wrap it up again. We'll be joined by both of you throughout the day. Soledad, back to you.
All right, Dan, thank you very much for that. Some interesting insight there. Well, military officials say that it's going to take years to repair the damage done to the Pentagon following Tuesday's terrorist attacks. The price tag could top $1 billion. Officials also say that they're going to begin calling up today as many as 35,000 civilian reservists to help support defenses at home. NBC's Norah O'Donnell is at the Pentagon for us this afternoon. Norah, good afternoon to you.
Hello, Soledad. Well, as President Bush warned today that Americans should be on a heightened sense of awareness, the U.S. military has upgraded to a level not seen since World War II and the raid on Pearl Harbor. President Bush has approved the Pentagon's request to call up some 50,000 reservists. 35,000 of those could be called up this weekend immediately. The reason? For homeland defense. They need these men and women to be called to duty, to come to active duty in order to be involved in some of the recovery efforts, but most importantly, to shore up our nation's defense. Many of them are going to be pilots, crews, other things, so that they can be in the air quickly in some of these fighter jets. We have constant patrols over New York City and Washington, D.C. They also want in 26 air bases around the country fighter jets ready to take off in 15 minutes, and that's why many of these reservists have been called in. We learned today from the Pentagon that in fact the plane that crashed into the Pentagon was being tracked, and they had already put up in the air 2 F-16s out of Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, but those fighter jets took off just 2 minutes before the plane crashed, so they were not up in the air in time to perhaps either divert or try and shoot down this plane. That being said, as far as the recovery and search efforts going underway here at the Pentagon, for the first time today, we got an up-close look at the type of damage and destruction inside the Pentagon. The Pentagon released this video shot by an Air Force combat cameraman, and you really get a sense of the fire damage, the twisted metal. You can see a pair of glasses on a desk. You can also see a clock just stopped at the time of the impact. And what officials are saying now is that they've really reached the heart of the crash. And last night, fire officials say that there was a significant number of bodies removed from inside this crash site. About a third of the Pentagon has been damaged. It's going to cost anywhere between $100 million and $1 billion to repair it. It's going to take several years. Today, what they're doing now is you see a lot of this damage. They believe they have most of the Pentagon area shored up so that it won't crumble any further. They're going to start doing from the top bottom, just pulling pieces off slowly but surely. Some irony here. It happens that the plane crashed into the Pentagon in a place that had just been renovated. After the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, the Pentagon undertook a massive renovation project to protect against terrorism. This wedge in the Pentagon had actually almost just completed being renovated. And so today, Pentagon officials had said, had this renovation not been done, the damage could have been much worse. Here's some sound from a Pentagon briefing earlier today by the manager of the Pentagon renovation project.
This was a terrible tragedy, and people lost their lives. But I'm here to tell you that had we not undertaken this effort in the building, this could have been much, much worse.
Could have been much worse because actually the area where the plane hit had been so well reinforced, they say it absorbed most of the plane crash, that it would have been destructed much more of the Pentagon had this plane not hit the area that had been renovated. One interesting note is that they, in fact, had Kevlar cloth, actually, which is the stuff in bulletproof vests. That's one of the things they're putting in the walls in between there to protect. So they say it could have been much worse today. Soledad.
Norah O'Donnell for us at the Pentagon. Norah, thank you very much for that report. NBC's Andrea Mitchell has been covering this story from the very beginning, focusing on the investigation. Andrea joins us from our Washington, D.C. bureau this afternoon. Andrea, there's lots of information known about Osama bin Laden. We know that he is wealthy, of Saudi Arabian descent. Is he using his personal funds, the money that he has, in order to fund this campaign of terror?
We have just learned, NBC News has just learned, some startling information about how he may have raised new funds in order to finance this operation. German regulators have asked the FBI and CIA to help them with an ongoing German investigation into short selling on reinsurance stocks in the 4 days prior to the attack. Reinsurance companies are companies that are secondary insurers who take the big risks on a major disaster, for instance. And apparently German regulators were looking into whether a Munich reinsurance company, which holds a considerable amount of risk on the World Trade Center, was in fact sold short by associates of bin Laden. Now, there may not be an American component on this because it is not clear at all that the Munich Reinsurance Company trades on any exchanges here in the United States. But what would be an American component is whether they deposit money in American banks, whether there are American depository receipts for this Munich Reinsurance Company. There's also been reporting in the Italian press today that investigators in France and in Italy are looking as well at other secondary insurers in those countries. In essence, bin Laden, who as you know is of Saudi birth and is believed to be a big trader in European stocks, may be financing his terror activities by selling stocks short with the advanced knowledge, obviously, that a terror act is going to be committed on a particular day. This is pretty astounding, pretty sophisticated, and it tells you a lot, not only about the financing of this kind of operation, but about the sophistication of Osama bin Laden. Soledad?
Andrea, is it possible that U.S. regulators would in any way be able to track if indeed the funds are put in American banks, be able to track that down, trace it? Obviously, he's not putting the funds in his own name, but if there's a way to trace it, and then they could essentially take over those accounts, is that possible?
Absolutely. The FBI, the FBI and the SEC, as well as units of the Treasury Department, have very sophisticated ways of tracking money laundering. You'll recall some of the big investigations into international banking scandals in the late 80s and early 90s, as well as the way Iranian deposits back in 1979 during the hostage crisis were all put on hold. Iranian money that was in American banks. There have also been lawsuits and attempts under various American laws to try to free up some Iranian deposit money to pay off people who had been victims of Iranian-sponsored terrorism in Israel and other parts of the Middle East. So the international financial system is highly complex, but very well tracked by American regulators. This is pretty fresh information. The request from the European regulators only came in on Friday. The SEC and the FBI are working overtime on it, but they have only just begun this investigation.
NBC's Andrea Mitchell reporting for us from Washington, D.C. Fascinating information, obviously just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what's going on financially. Thanks very much, Andrea. Well, today from Camp David, the president and his top members of his cabinet made it very clear we're at war, and not just with prime target Osama bin Laden.
What we have to do is not just go after these perpetrators and those who gave them haven, but the whole curse of terrorism that is upon the face of the earth.
But if indeed we are going to war with the vast and mostly underground terror network, just how do you track down the members? Joining us now, retired United States Marine Corps General Bernard Traynor. General Traynor is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. General Traynor, thank you very much for joining us. Let's begin exactly with that question. You're talking about a very secretive group. We're talking about people who do not operate under their own name, but instead use various aliases in various countries. They're not located now in one place, but all across the Middle East and in Africa. How do you possibly track down an underground network of people who essentially act as guerrilla terrorists?
Soledad, it is very difficult because it's an amorphous group. It's broken into cells. It's very fluid. It doesn't have any fixed location in a fixed building. It's in all countries, including the United States, obviously, from what happened last week. It is difficult. And it's a slow and painstaking process of collecting little bits of intelligence. And you have to expect that the intelligence community can use all of its means to do that. But even then, it's not going to be sufficient because these crowds have so many cutouts. So there has to be the enlistment of foreign intelligence networks who have a better fix on this. And it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. a little bit at a time. But if there's just one piece missing, the picture is incomplete. So it's a difficult job, and it's going to be unlike any war that we've ever fought in the past, because you're almost carrying on a war against a phantom that constantly moves. But intelligence is the key to getting at the source.
I would imagine that cooperation is also the key. And I want to take a look at a map at the countries that surround Afghanistan. As we have heard, Pakistan has agreed to help the United States. They stopped short, however, of allowing ground troops in. We know that Iran is also being cooperative. Tell me a little bit about how critical cooperation from these countries that surround Afghanistan, which of course is exactly where Osama bin Laden is believed to be holed up, how critical that cooperation will be.
Well, it's enormously critical. They approach it from two perspectives. They have their own countries to be concerned about, and then they also want to find out what is going on by the Taliban organization and the bin Laden organization on their borders. So they are very attuned, not for our purposes, but for their own purposes of self-interest. They want to know about these terrorist groups because those terrorist groups present a threat to themselves. So they are the ones that, particularly those on the periphery of Afghanistan, are the ones that can provide the best information on at least the bin Laden organization. But remember, this is not just against the Al-Qaeda, which is the bin Laden enterprise, but there are all sorts of dissident groups out there that constitute part of the terrorist infrastructure. And it's in addition to bin Laden, we want to be able to shut down all of them, and the way we can do that is in large measure by putting pressure on those who are hosting these organizations, whether they're doing it voluntarily or involuntarily, and many of them are doing it involuntarily, but we have to show them it is in their greater interest to get rid of these cells rather than to tolerate them and indeed support them.
General Bernard Traynor, thanks for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate your time. And let's take an opportunity now to get you up to date on the very latest. Newsweek magazine is reporting that the FBI had been investigating two of the alleged hijacker just before Tuesday's attack. Newsweek's Michael Isikoff told us a little bit earlier that the FBI had been on the trail of the two suspects for several weeks. One of the men is suspected in carrying out the attack against the USS Cole. President Bush is mapping out a battle plan for a war on terrorism, which he vows to win. He is meeting with his national security team at Camp David under extremely tight security. Today is the first time that the president and the vice president have been together since Tuesday's attacks. And the first signs of an economic fallout today for the terrorist attacks. Anticipating a drop in airline travel, both Continental and Northwest Airlines announced that they are cutting their schedules by 20%. Continental also announced the layoffs of 12,000 workers. The White House plans to meet with airline officials as early as Monday. Well, it's now the fifth day after the World Trade Center and the Pentagon attacks, and the horrific scope of just what happened is still sinking in. The emotions for many folks are overwhelming. But when NBC News asked Americans what emotions were the strongest, sadness and disbelief were high on the list. But above all, people said that they were angry. And when asked whether the anger should be channeled into military action, 83% of Americans, an overwhelming number, said yes. Here's Dateline NBC's Josh Mankiewicz about America's desire for revenge.
He needs our daily and continual prayer, not just going to crowbars, bare hands, to dislodge the debris. Her phone rings, it's her husband, Tom. Tom, are you okay? No.
In Sacramento. Are you willing to see America get bloody? In Atlanta.
In the military. You know, are you willing, are you ready to step up to the plate?
In Dallas.
I feel like that we need to send troops over there and take care of business.
And in Los Angeles.
Do we have the resolve to make war?
From coast to coast, as fear turns to fury, as victims turn to vengeance, America has filled its lungs for one long primal scream.
My feeling is, you know, you don't go in with nuclear, but you go in, you blow up a few countries.
And those who spend their days listening to America aren't a bit surprised.
If you're not angry, there's something wrong with you.
Dennis Prager hosts a daily talk show on LA's KRLA, and lately has seen a country regularly torn apart by its divisions come together in a remarkable display of unity, fueled by a growing anger.
You think in this case rage sort of might make the difference between being able to get a national spirit together and not?
It's not just rage and clarity. It's clear. These are bad people.
Vengeance is a very common human need, some sort of consequence for some noxious intrusion on your life.
Trauma psychiatrist Scott Saunders of UCLA says the desire to strike back is a healthy one.
A sustained anger and a sustained wish for something dramatic to be done to right this wrong. And it won't right the wrong because the wrong has already been done, but it will make you feel better. And that's human nature. Revenge fantasies are human nature. The wish for revenge is human nature.
This is a country that loves to talk about healing, about closure, and about sort of binding our wounds and moving on. There's a lot of talk about moving on whenever there's some national crisis. And in this case, you think we shouldn't move on. We should be angry.
Oh, we move on in the sense of we move to eradicate the possibility of repeating this and punishing those who did it. That's how you move on in life.
Even today, even at prayer services, the message of peace is accompanied by a promise of war. On the streets.
I want justice. As an American, I want justice.
On the air.
I would like to see our government respond appropriately, which would be with force.
Over the internet, a culture that has for years held up its tolerance as a symbol for the rest of the world is now preparing to make quite a different statement. One side effect of this national anger is likely to be less public patience than ever in letting the legal system take its course. Unlike Oklahoma City, unlike Lockerbie, and unlike the first attack on the World Trade Center, Americans this time are looking for answers not from prosecutors, but from the military.
This notion of finding people and bringing them to justice has to also be abandoned. Did anybody say we have to find the Japanese pilots who bombed Pearl Harbor and bring them to court?
I think we should attack them, use military force. I think it should be very strong, very intense, and prove our point immediately.
Is this a new American character, or are we just coming full circle? After all, it was on this day in 1814 that Francis Scott Key penned the Star-Spangled Banner. Now, 187 years later, a country born in battle is ready once again for the rocket's red glare.
That was Josh Mankiewicz reporting. And although they are 3,000 miles away, people on the West Coast are sharing some of the same sense of grief as those in New York and Washington, D.C. NBC producer Greg Katz spoke with...
What's been done to us has been done to us this week. We have to remember to act, as I've been hearing people say, out of justice, not revenge.
We have to seek out those who really, truly perpetrated this cowardly and vicious act, and they have to reassure the American people that we will and that we can perform justice on these individuals.
First, they have to just confirm who the bombers are, because I don't know. They don't know if it's Osama bin Laden totally, and then they have to not use nuclear missiles, but just do something about it. I don't know what.
It looks like Tuesday's attacks may take a severe financial toll on the airlines. Industry executives and analysts are predicting a drastic drop in air travel and billions of dollars in losses. Today, the chairman of Continental Airlines, Gordon Bethune, announced major cutbacks. The airline will immediately reduce its long-term flight schedule by 20%. Up until now, Continental flew 2,500 flights a day. Also, 12,000 employees will be put on a forced furlough because of the flight cuts. Another big change involving airlines and airports: security. Here's NBC's Robert Hager.
Until now, only about half as many planes as normal have been flying. Lots of cancellations, and at some airports, long waits at ticket counters.
The line starts outside, goes to the on-ramp, comes back, goes inside, comes back outside. It zigzags like I've never seen before.
At Chicago O'Hare, the Red Cross served coffee to the many still stranded. Even telephoning for reservations was hard.
They're not answering. It's going into an immediate busy signal. I tried for 3.5 hours this morning trying to get through. I've been to the airport twice.
Security, as promised, was heavy. Guards with explosive-sniffing dogs. Many bags searched by hand.
They're going through your clothes, you know, your dirty clothes, everything. So, it's, you know, you got to sit here while they just rummage through all your stuff.
And at this terminal in Los Angeles, 2 checkpoints for each passenger. But many, still shaken by events, find the extra security reassuring.
I was queasy at first, but then I'm like, okay, at least I know they're taking the steps, and the steps they take are necessary.
By Monday morning, most airlines hope to be back to normal schedules.
Another rough day as the nation's airlines struggle to get back into the skies. The system now operating at about 60% of its normal levels. And the airlines say they're taking an economic hit, say that the events of the past week have cost them $1 billion, and that travelers are frightened about future travel, that bookings for future travel are off drastically. As a result, Continental Airlines today announced it'll shrink its permanent schedule by 20% and immediately lay off 12,000 workers. And American Airlines has also said it will lay off 12,000 workers. Around the country today, there was still confusion at airports and some long lines. At Dulles Airport outside Washington, we saw one line at a ticket counter that took passengers 6 hours to get through. There was another line at Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta that took 1 hour to get through. On the investigative front, that cockpit voice recorder pulled from the scene of the crash of the hijacked airliner in Pennsylvania, that was examined by the National Transportation Safety Board this morning. They said it had been damaged. They were unable to get meaningful information off it, but they think maybe the manufacturer can enhance it and extract some good information, and so they've sent it to the manufacturer out in Seattle to see if that work can be done. This is Robert Hager, NBC News in Washington.